Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Today I'm speaking with Maxine Holt, who's a research director at the industry analyst Ovum. Ovum's well known globally and Maxine leads their security practice. She is focused on cybersecurity and is an expert on helping companies avoid hacking and other issues that can cause sensitive customer data to be lost. Maxine will be delivering a keynote speech on trends in cybersecurity at the CXOutsourcers conference in Windsor on March 25th, so I took the opportunity to ask her about some of these issues in advance of the conference. Okay, so let's go straight to the interview. So we're now almost exactly a year into GDPR enforcement. Has anything changed? I mean, are companies taking much more care of customer data now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're coming up for a year, 10 months into since when GDPR was launched, and without a doubt, companies are taking a lot more care of customer data. I think compliance was challenging for many organisations, and unfortunately, some of them buried their head in the sand and still are doing so, I think. But those that took a kind of comprehensive approach, so, looking at their existing data privacy programs and seeing where GDPR, where they needed to make up for GDPR, then that's resulted in increased protection of customer data. So that's positive. Even those that took a tick box approach, I've got to comply with this, I've got to comply with that, have still the outcome is still that customer data is better protected. So that's good. But I still think there's a long way to go for some enterprises as well.
Mm-hmm. And has it been the enforcement of GDPR that's forced this attention, forced people to take it more seriously, or was it already rising up the agenda in the boardroom?
Definitely already rising up the agenda in the boardroom. So I think we need to be clear that security is not compliance. Compliance is not security. But compliance and regulation such as GDPR absolutely influences security. So security has already been on the agenda of enterprise boards for quite some time now. Nobody wants to be the next headline in the news. But compliance certainly helped focus board attention. It helped spend some money as well. Certainly enterprises had to spend some money on making sure that they were GDPR compliant. So the requirement for compliance has driven board attention. I think what's going to start driving more board attention now is actually enforcement, as you described. So we're seeing some fines now, some interesting fines. So there's the big one that everybody's aware of, the 50 million euros that was meted out to Google for a couple of reasons. But then there are some other quite interesting fines going on. So a small business in Austria was fined just short of 5,000 euros for their CCTV camera taking up too much public space and therefore compromising privacy. So that was another interesting one that I think is going to help raise the attention of not just the boards of big companies, but the managers and the directors of smaller organisations as well. That actually no organisation that holds data about EU citizens is actually immune from the regulation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so are there any particular security platforms that are gaining more importance? Are the decision makers sort of looking at particular systems or solutions then?
So technology helps with compliance with GDPR. It helps with overall security, but technology is only one part of security. You need people and process as well to make sure that security controls are applied appropriately. But in terms of the technology, the security platforms, what we're seeing now is that integrated platforms are key. So if we think that the average enterprise has unbelievably around 75 security products in their arsenal, that's a huge number of products for that need to be managed. It's crazy numbers. So what the technology vendors are doing, particularly the bigger security technology vendors, is that they're integrating these products so that there is it makes it slightly easier for an enterprise to actually manage. But then what we're also seeing evidence of is the big security tech vendors, the likes of Symantec and McAfee, for example. They've developed security platforms that don't just integrate with their own products, but also integrate with the products of some of their competitors. And this is the recognition about these multiple security products that enterprises have to deal with, and they're building these platforms, and it's going to be a slow burn, I think, for enterprises to move across to these, because of course they don't want to compromise the spend that they've made already. They don't want to lose that spend on those security products. So it's a case of making sure that those products can talk to these platforms, and that then that's going to help them deal with security incidents and breaches. But I think the other thing that we need to bear in mind here is the security workforce shortage. It's estimated to be around 3 million globally, kind of good 2/3 of that in Asia Pacific, but a significant number, around 500,000 in the US, or North America, should I say, sorry, well over 100,000 in EMEA, about 130, I think is the number. So, significant numbers of open positions in security, and that means that these security platforms are even more important from an integration perspective, because we've got to enable these to work much more seamlessly than they do now for enterprises.
So cybersecurity is a great place to get some training then.
Oh yes, most definitely. Encourage your children to go into cyber.
Okay, well, one thing that I find interesting is when one organization outsources a service to another, and then the supplier has a problem, like a data breach, for instance, like a contact center that's handling sensitive customer data. What happens then? Because you see that quite often the main client will blame the supplier, and yet the customers don't really care. They just want to make sure or know that their data's safe. So how does that work?
So yes, the customer will blame the owner of that data, if you will, and that's the reality. And reputational damage is a huge issue. So irrespective of actually which organisation is responsible for the loss of the data, it's the data. The organisation that holds the data originally that will be held responsible in the customer's eyes. So that means that these organisations have to perform strong due diligence on their partners, their suppliers, etc., to make sure that they are compliant with GDPR or whatever else it is that they need to be compliant with, and to make sure that they've got strong security standards within their organisation. So there's a range of technology. There's one that Ovum's recently done some research on vendor risk management, and where there's actually technology available to help build an understanding of the capabilities, the security capabilities that suppliers have within the supply chain, to make sure that they are as secure as possible. Because as you quite rightly point out, Mark, in the customer's eyes, it doesn't matter who actually lost the data. They don't care about the whys and wherefores. They care that their privacy has been breached.
Exactly, yeah. And I suppose then, if you're a manager thinking about this today, what is the first couple of steps they can do to sort of review their risk profile then? Okay,
so I think in terms of reviewing your risk profile, what you need to think about is any new partners that you're going to use going forward, any new digital projects that you might have. You need to incorporate digital risk into that. So start from now, definitely, and then once you've got this process underway, then you need to start looking backwards, if you will, at the relationships that you have, at the projects that you have delivered, to actually understand more about digital risk. Because so often projects, suppliers have been worked with where that hasn't been the case. So you need to take a look at what the risk might be. You can do your standard risk assessments, your likelihood multiplied by impact to determine risk. But then what this does is, it helps identify where the most important risks are, and therefore the risks that you actually need to address in the first instance. So it may be that you're working with one supplier, and you do a quick check on those, and it turns out that actually you're not providing them with very much information at all. They're providing, the service that they're giving to you doesn't actually present a significant risk at all. So then you might look at the next one and realize that actually we need to do far more due diligence with this supplier and go into it in more detail. So that's what you can do with kind of reviewing your digital risk profile. There's also a lot of options out there to do things around security scoring for suppliers, so you can take a look at security scores. Some of that's freely available, some of it is a paid for service, but that's also really good to get a picture of the security attitude, if you will, of individual suppliers.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm at Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.